Hi, everybody. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course, and it's called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that is teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Nehemiah Mabry. He's quite smart. He has a PhD in structural engineering from NC State, and he also works as a bridge design engineer. But did you know that he's got bars too? He's a STEM poet. He weaves his love of STEM and poetry into distinct masterpieces. He's also the founder of STEMedia, whose goal is to inspire underrepresented children to consider STEM fields. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Nehemiah.
Oh man, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. So first question, where did your interest in engineering come from?
Oh man, where did my interest come from? You know, I think the interest was natural for a large part, but I would have to attribute my involvement to my dad. My pops was the one who told me, you know what you need to do is you need to go into engineering. So I considered it, at the time I didn't know what it was. All I knew is that people who drove trains were called engineers. But after having a conversation with him, telling him, you know, hey, I want to do something that involves design. I want to do something that involves, you know, my affinity for math. I was pretty good at math growing up. He was the one who said, you know, you should look into doing something, structural engineering or something of that nature. And so I have to give it to my dad, who is also today an engineer as well.
Oh, wow. You know, I thought that I was the only person that had this story. So I actually became an engineer because of my dad too.
Really?
Yeah, honestly. He was the one that suggested that I go into engineering. And back then, I listened to everything he said, so I just did it. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's a message to all the fathers watching this. You know, your influence is very significant in the life of your children.
Hey, man, it wasn't no influence. I didn't think I had a choice. He didn't advise it. He didn't suggest it. He said, do it.
That's that next level influence then when you have to.
Yeah, for real. I mean, yeah, that's kind of how it was. Luckily, it worked out, though.
I got you. Yeah. Well, great. That's great.
Yeah, so I mentioned in the intro that you have a PhD in structural engineering. So why'd you pick structural?
Yeah. So going back to the story, originally I was thinking something more architectural. You know, I knew about architects. I felt architects didn't involve as much math as I was capable of. So I said, all right, I'll do architectural engineering. But for those who may have looked into architectural engineering, it's actually a niche. It isn't like a widespread or common major as a number of schools out there. So at the school I was going to didn't have it. So I decided to choose the next big thing. So I said structural engineering. So going into structural engineering was my closest fit. But it turned out right because I actually like it. I do more related to bridges and not so much, you know, residential architecture, which is what I thought I would do. But nevertheless, I think I kind of made my way into the right area.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I mentioned that also you did a PhD. You didn't just stop at a bachelor's. You went all the way.
Yeah.
So what was the motivation to beginning a PhD?
That's a good question, man. I just stayed in school because originally it was like, man, I'm gonna graduate. You know, as you know, engineering is not one of the easiest majors out there. So I was ready to just get out there and just like, you know, get into the working world. But I graduated at a time known as the Great Recession, so to speak. So the summer after I finished my bachelor's degree, unemployment reached kind of its peak that summer. So here I am going to career fairs, going to, you know, job interviews with people just being straight out like, hey, I'm gonna be honest with you. Not only do we not have a job opening, we're actually about to lay off a couple of dozen people in this coming week. So I was like, hey, it's no use. So I had an opportunity to receive a fellowship, which was something that could pay for my master's degree. And so I stayed in school 3 more years. And then finishing that master's degree, it was approached to me by those who awarded me the fellowship, which happened to be NASA at the time. They said, hey, if you want to go forward with your PhD, we'll help you get started on that too. And so at that point, I decided to remain in school just because of the options and opportunity that was in front of me. So I said, let me just go all the way, knock it out now, as people try to say. And I'm glad I did it.
Wow, that's an interesting story. Yeah, I guess that would be a reason to stay in school for sure. You know, I had somebody else that was on the channel, and she also got a PhD. And at least from my experience, people that tend to get PhDs want to enter academia, but she didn't. So I was curious, when you were done, was that always the plan when you did your PhD to stay in academia? And if not, what? And if it was, and obviously you didn't, so what changed your mind?
Yeah, man, I love to hear that because that is an assumption. But though that is a common path, no, I didn't plan to stay in academia as well. I wanted to get out in the field and make a contribution. I wanted to do something that later on I can go back and point at and say, hey, I designed that, to my children or something like that. So I definitely was intentional not to remain in academia. I wanted to get out into the working world. But with that being said, I did discover that I have a passion and a gift for speaking, as this podcast is all about, and for educating. And so even though I am currently working in industry, I have also worked as an adjunct professor in academia. So something I do part-time outside of my 9 to 5.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, okay. So I guess you went kind of I guess nowadays that's kind of it's not exactly, I guess, assumed that if you get a PhD that you stay in academia. And frankly, I don't even think there's enough PhD or academic jobs for the people that finish PhD.
They're competitive because, as you know, all the professors, well, not all the professors, but a lot of professors, they stay working in those roles. So they're like 50, 60, 70 or beyond sometimes. And so it's not like these jobs are coming available every year, though PhDs are graduating every year. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I also mentioned in the intro that you combine STEM and poetry. So I'm a big fan of spoken word. I've been a fan of it, for years. So I live here in San Diego, and there's an event that happens every month in LA. I don't go every month because it's kind of a trek from San Diego to LA. But every I guess they usually have the big showcases either in July or August. It's in and they get pretty much the best spoken word artists they can find throughout the country. Mm-hmm. And they usually have a musical guest. It's a really nice evening. I haven't missed since it started. I think it started 5 years ago, and I've gone every year since it's been in existence. It's a great time. But I've never heard anybody combining STEM and poetry. So out of curiosity, like where'd that even come from?
Oh man, Well, first of all, I'm jealous of you out there in San Diego on the West Coast, man. Lovely weather. Just you explaining it, I was like, man, I would love to be at one of those events, just to be in the atmosphere. But yeah, man, I got a hold of this. First of all, poetry in general, spoken word was something that I got involved in when I was a kid. I was at one of those schools that used to have like those end of the year programs, and they say, hey, you got to learn a poem or you got to learn some part. And so I used to like have to learn poems and perform them here and there, and occasionally write my own. But then later it became like something that naturally came to mind at times when I was in school. What I would do when I would try to understand concepts, I would often remember them by likening them to other metaphors or connecting them with other types of like analogies or things like that. And so I just remember there was one time I was trying to think of, I don't know, what pretty much bars, right? Like bars related to some of the work I've been doing. And so I stayed up one night and just wrote a poem trying to incorporate the technical concepts that I had been learning. And it turned out that it was pretty good. So I recorded it, hopped on the camera, got a buddy to record it. That's still on YouTube right now, actually. And after recording that video, I said, hey, this is something unique. So I connected with some people on campus. They also thought it was unique. An organization known as NESB, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with.
Yep.
Yeah, we had like a little poetry slam. And from there, it just kind of hit. People kind of gravitated towards it. So I said, let me continue to try to do this. So it became like a little niche program actually that happens regularly, not only at NC State, but a workshop that I've developed and done at different schools. And so it kind of grew organically just from my natural diverse interests, as we all kind of are eclectic. So that's where it derived from for me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. When I learned that, I was just like, wow, spoken word and science and engineering. You usually hear those two things go together, but the fact you ever put them together, I think is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So, I mentioned also in the intro that you're the founder of STEMedia. So what exactly is STEMedia, and what type of initiatives does the STEMedia do?
Yeah. Appreciate you asking that. STEMedia is for all intents and purposes, a media company that provides creative educational and inspirational content for the STEM community. And so it kind of began as a natural growth of things, again, that I was interested in naturally, my own kind of personal extracurricular activities. I was able to enter into a contest back in 2012, which was a video contest for motivating engineering students to remain in engineering. I was able to record like a creative day in the life video, submit it to the sponsors who were MTV and Intel at the time. And I was fortunate to win first place, national grand prize of this thing. And so from there, I said, man, hey, here's another thing where I think I can combine some of my creative interests into my technical studies in STEM. And so from there, I started to get requests from other people, other programs, after-school programs, camps, professors who wanted to also create some content or just creative things and programs for their class. And so it developed into a kind of a media production company, basically at the time, where I was just running around campus with a little camera and record a promo here or do something with this professor there. And the clients began to ask. And then from there, I decided to incorporate it as a formal business at the urging of different mentors. And so once that happened, the rest was history, man. I began to advertise and get requests, near and abroad. I even had the opportunity to work with people out your way too. So I would say video production, and as well as workshops that are presented for K-12 and higher ed relating to creativity in engineering, maintaining persistence as an engineering student, and just also other STEM and creativity topics in general.
No, that's a pretty noble goal of and even kind of combining, video production and doing workshop. I mean, that's not even something I've really heard of either. So it just seems like you're just a trailblazer all around, man. It's like,
all right, man, thank you. I appreciate it. There are a lot of people I gain a lot of inspiration from. After doing this, I come across people like yourself who obviously is using media to add a voice, which is essentially what I'm doing, add a voice to the STEM conversation from different angles. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I mentioned it also in the intro that you work as a bridge design engineer. You also have this company, STEMedia. Is there any plans of eventually just doing STEMedia full time?
We'll see, man. We'll see how it goes. Ultimately, well, I wouldn't say ultimately, but one of the objectives is to provide for my family, as you know. And I realized I've been investing these years into my formal education, and I've become, competent in the area of structural engineering and bridge design in particular. And so I'm still trying to get a return on that investment and make sure that it's put to work in a way that I wanted to put it to work, and also provide for my family in that way. But you never know. I think we live in a time where you don't have to do the same job for 30 years. And so there is an opportunity or a possibility, I would even say, a likelihood that at some point STEMedia may become a major part of my focus. When I say focus, I mean from 9 to 5, as my bridge design job is. But then who knows, also, I may also get heavy back into education, which is an option that remains available for me with a PhD. And so the answer is probably so, but we'll see. I'm just enjoying the ride.
All right, that's fair. So, I mean, you mentioned that you go around and you do public speaking in to various places. Mm-hmm. Is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what have you done to improve?
Thank you, man. That's another good question. I don't know if it's something I've necessarily always been good at, but I can say that it's something I've always had to do. I'm the second oldest of 7 children. And so, when mom walks into the room and she sees a mess everywhere, of course, the person that's going to have to speak for the entire group is the leader. And so being the oldest boy, my oldest sister actually has special needs. So I became leader by default, just acting leader. So I always had to speak up on behalf of everyone in my family at the time. There were times when my mom would force me to go to the counter and order this for her or do this, that, and the other. And at the time I thought she was being mean, but it really developed the skill for me, I would say. And so realizing that, hey, this is a gift or talent that I have, eventually I stopped fighting it. And I said, let me just go ahead and embrace this. And so in terms of improving, once I got intentional about it, that's when I began to intentionally do it, look for opportunities, say yes, and then get feedback from people who care about me, who are paying attention. Hey, how did that go? What do you think? was clear. What do you think I can improve on? I began to watch some of the greats, some of the people who are doing it for a living at a high level. The Eric Thomases of the world, the Les Browns, Tony Robbins, those individuals. And so kind of analyzing what they do, getting an idea of just different ways to engage audiences. And last thing about that, I would just say, what really got me to really become more intentional is when I realized that it is one of those skills that can pretty much, for lack of a better word, accessorize or enhance any career, regardless of what you're doing. Like, you can be the most technical person who has a job that's really dependent upon, just hacking away at a computer. If you're able to communicate and say what you're doing in a way that people can understand and connect and be engaged, I think that just adds value pretty much in anything you're trying to accomplish.
You know what? You're absolutely right. And when you were talking about your mother forcing you to go order at the counter, it reminded me of my own childhood. Well, yeah. I didn't have to actually go to the counter. It was even more than that. So when I was a kid, we had to go to church, right? Every Sunday, without fail. And at the church that I went to, there used to be a whole lot of like extracurricular stuff after church. So there used to be, stuff for Black History Month, other things like Christmas play, all that kind of stuff. I had to participate in all of that, and I volunteered for none of it.
Right, you didn't want to do it. You didn't want to do it. Yeah.
Yo, man, I'll be like I played Joseph in the Christmas play. I volunteered for nothing. My mother would come home and be like, here's the playbook.
Right, here's your script. Learn it.
Learn it.
You got rehearse. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, man.
Man,
like, yo, can I just be a tree? Like, can I do something that just kind of stands there?
Yeah, a tree. Do I have to be in it, man? Can I be in the audience? Damn.
Right. Can I look?
For nothing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It definitely is a skill that a lot of us in the STEM fields lack. And I just noticed that even just working as an engineer, I worked in medical devices as an engineer for a number of years. And I had to give presentations every month. And at first, even after doing all those Christmas plays when I was a kid, I wasn't very good at it at first.
Yeah.
It was very intimidating getting up in front of all these senior management people.
Right.
And I noticed a lot of the other engineers, they weren't very good at it either.
Yeah.
But I got a lot better at it with time. And I basically took everything that I learned and I turned it into that course I talked about earlier, Teach the Geek to Speak.
And I'm glad you're doing this too, man, because that's really what it is. You get better by doing it. You get better by doing it. And unlike, some things that you just go away and you just read. Oh, I'm a better, I don't know, mathematician now, or whatever you want to say. But really, it comes down to you putting it into practice, getting those reps in. And I can tell you this, and I don't know if this would have came up, but when I was an undergrad, I was actually a part of a improv drama group. And so this was kind of shortly after I had, as I said, kind of embraced the fact that, hey, this is just something that I should become more involved in, the speaking. So I joined the improv drama group, and man, did that do wonders for me. So even when I was nervous or I wasn't quite as confident in my material, I knew how to still present, stand up in front of an audience comfortably in a way as if, I knew what I was talking about, or as if I felt like I was about to share something that's about to change their world. So improv was maybe an unorthodox but extremely helpful practice for me when it got to me being more involved as a speaker.
Wow. Nehemiah, I thought that I thought I was unique, but like a lot of the things that you've done, I did too. So I did improv for I took an improv class actually.
I love it. Yeah.
And I actually did a couple of years ago, I did a stand-up comedy class too.
Wow. Okay. Now you got me on that. I never did that before. Yeah. Cool.
So there's here in San Diego, there's the Comedy Store. So there's a location in San Diego, but the main one most people know about is the one in LA. So that's the one where people that you probably know of, stand-up comedians go there and just do sets. But the one in San Diego isn't as nearly as popular because obviously it's not in LA. But the woman that runs it, she's do you know who Pauly Shore is, the comedian?
Pauly Shore, name sounds very familiar.
He was kind of popular in the 90s. He was a comedian, but it's his sister that runs the program, or I guess it was 9-week stand-up comedy workshop that I was a part of. So every Saturday there was a bunch of us, like, I don't know, maybe about 10, 15, something like that. And we go up there and, practice, being up on stage and telling jokes and stuff. And it ended in a showcase. And we all got to go up there in front of friends and family and tell jokes. And it was a lot of fun. And, you mentioned the people that you look up to when it comes to the public speaking, Eric Thomas and Les Brown, Tony Robbins, those types. For me, when it comes to public speaking, I look up to stand-up comedians.
Oh, man, that's what they're doing.
Like Cat Williams, Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, those guys.
Yeah.
And because when it comes to public speaking, to maintain people's, attention.
Yeah.
If you're able to be, humorous at all, then it goes a long way to maintain just keeping people engaged and listening.
Absolutely. So it sounds like I'm gonna have to take a stand-up comedy class as well, man. I'm gonna have to steal that tip. So appreciate you sharing that one.
Yeah. It was a ton of fun, and the improv was cool too. So when it comes to you and public speaking, do you have a process that you go through to develop your speeches, or is it kind of it's different for every speech?
Yeah. I think I have a process. It's just probably not as systematized or identified. It's kind of like this. So I'm married. My wife is a teacher, and sometimes she's teaching math and science, and she's saying, "Hey, this is this topic, this is this lesson," and I hear her teaching things, and I'm like, by now I don't even label it. I go through the process. I normally carry the one. I normally do those type of things. The order of operations. But I'm not always cognizant that, hey, that's what I'm doing in this instance. So that's kind of how my process is. But if I can try to describe it for you, I would say that I usually start with trying to figure out what it is that the audience needs to hear. Like, am I going to educate? Okay, what am I trying to share with them? What do I want to make sure that they know at the end of the day? I'm trying to inspire. Well, if I'm trying to inspire, what's that central message that I think should be ringing in their minds to inspire them at the end of the message? If I'm just trying to inform about something that's happening, okay, what are those details that I need to hit? And so when I put that down on the paper, or I make sure that I'm clear about what those central objectives or takeaways are, so to speak, that's when I begin to fill in the different mechanics or the different modules, so to speak, that you can use to illustrate whatever you're trying to get across. So for me, it would be maybe a story from my past. All right, let me see if I can go ahead and set this up with a story of something that I experienced or something that I may have watched or seen that can maybe set the table for this. Another thing I like to use are analogies, kind of going back to the metaphors, using spoken word, but what is the same thing but in a different context? All right, what can I use as an analogy? And then examples. Examples is another thing, which could be an analogy, but also it could be, hey, here is something that happened before of this same message, and this is the result that came. Hence, this is why I want you to do this same process and get a result that you're looking for. And so these are different modules in my mind, really, that I say, okay, how can I hit it? And one of the things that I learned early on, too, is that you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to, turn on a fire hose and try to, pour it on the audience, because though you may be seeing a lot of good stuff, a lot of stuff can get missed in the process because you just kind of overdid it. So I usually try to crystallize my talk to about 3 to 5 points, if that many. If this is a short talk, really 1 point. It's at the end of the day, all this needs to be done. But definitely don't want to get up to where I'm like, all right, 7, 10, 12 steps. I'm like, okay, 12 steps. This needs to be multiple parts, or I need to write a book or something. You know what I mean? So that's usually what I try to do.
Man, when I put this course together, I was doing it based on what I thought was useful. And from just hearing what you're talking about now, I know I went down the right path, because a lot of the things that you're talking about, I mentioned in the course. I mentioned, limiting the number of points you have in a presentation, because the more points you add, the higher cognitive load there is. The more people have to think about what you're saying, and then they're going to just tune out and go on their phones and look at Facebook.
Absolutely. Yeah, simplify.
Yeah, for real. And then, using analogies and telling stories, man. Stories are so important when it comes to presenting, because especially, it started back when you were a child. When you get a bedtime story from either of your parents. You like stories back then. It's not as if when you became an adult, you didn't like stories anymore. People like listening to stories, and you present whatever you're talking about in the form of a story, you're going to get a lot more engagement. People are going to pay attention and they want to know how it ends and all that. That whole
Right.
thing. You're absolutely right. You're definitely on the right track, and because you're on the right track, I'm on the right track too. So
Yeah,
great
both
minds think
like
alike, man.
I love it. But there's still always more for us to learn. So yeah, absolutely, and we're on the right path. And as a matter of fact, speaking of stories, I remember there was one time I intentionally started a story at the beginning of my talk and just didn't end it, like intentionally. Like I didn't say I'm going to stop. I just literally went off into another direction and did the whole talk, never finishing what happened when, in this particular story, I got on the bus after having an adventure. And I said, okay, and so next thing I know, then I get on the bus and finally I see. And then I say, let me tell you something real quick. And so I kind of gave some points. And literally at the end of the talk, people were like, all right, so what happened when you finally got on the bus? And I was like, it worked like a charm. My goal was to try to get people to just try to wait to hear the end of the story. And that was just kind of evident of proof of the fact that, we are pretty much designed to just want to hear a good story, want to hear how things resolve, want to know what happens at the end of the day. So, man, that's just another example of how a story is a powerful tool in public speaking.
No doubt. So when you give presentations, do you ever get nervous? And if you do, how do you combat those nerves?
Do I ever get nervous? Man, I get anxious, and I probably will say that's a little different than nervous, because I never, at this point, I can't say, I used to a lot, but standing in front of people hasn't made me nervous in a while. Like, I've gotten more comfortable just standing in front of people. However, I do get a little anxious about the message, what I'm going to share, right? I start to wonder, hey, is this the right message? Or sometimes I'll say, is it even like substantial enough for the people who are looking forward to hearing it? There may be times where like they'll read the bio or say some great words, like you said at the beginning of the podcast or the interview. Like, I'm like, oh man, am I going to live up to that? So sometimes I worry, I can find myself getting caught up in those type of anxious thoughts. But in terms of combating it, usually 99.9% of the time, it's because I'm beginning to think more about myself in terms over thinking about the audience, right? Like, it's not so much about how am I going to do, or are they going to like me, or are they going to accept me or what I have? Let me start thinking about, let me make sure I give them, right, what they need. So it really comes with a change of perspective, not so much thinking about myself, but thinking more about what I'm here to give, what I'm here to provide. That usually helps me to get my mind off of those anxious thoughts.
That's another thing that I mentioned in the course is it's something that I think a lot of speakers don't do but need to, is kind of take an analysis of who's in the audience. And
right.
Once you know who's in the audience, you kind of know how to tailor whatever you're talking about. Especially for us people in the, I think us people in us in the STEM fields, we're especially guilty of this. We'll present what we got to present, and you take it how you take it. But it's really not useful. You spend all that time and effort putting together a presentation, and people aren't able to receive it, and the message is lost, and it's not clear, and you didn't put enough time and effort into thinking about those kind of things. All of your time and effort that you took to give that presentation or to prepare that presentation, all of it's to waste. You wasted your time essentially, and you wasted the people's time too, the audience's time.
I agree.
So what kind of tips would you have for people that want to improve in public speaking?
Number one tip, of course, is just to do it. Do it. I don't care what it is. Like, if it's at church, because I related to your story about church so much. Whether it's at church, whether it's at the office, whether it is, I don't know, at the library, whether it's just having a program at home with your family members and get the karaoke machine. Like, just do it. Do it, right? And you'll start kind of feeling your voice a little bit. I think finding something you're passionate about to speak about goes a long way. It's a difference between you trying to force something that really isn't something you care about versus something that, hey, I'm excited about this. Honestly, I would love to have a conversation about this. But when you find a good topic, that really goes a long way in pushing you to do it. But then after that, lastly, I would say get into the habit of what we just got finished talking about, thinking of ways you can pretty much serve, you can give, not necessarily take. You know, you're going to give and provide and to share value. So begin to think about, all right, I'm passionate about this topic. I have this opportunity. How can I make sure that they leave with something that they appreciate, that they're thankful for when I'm all said and done? And so, yeah, that those were probably my tips. Of course, a stand-up comedy class wouldn't be a bad idea. Getting into improv drama wouldn't be a bad idea. Just all those things that help you get comfortable with presenting. But yeah, that's all I can say right now off the top of my head, man. But if you want information and you're watching this, I would say definitely check out the Teach to Geek to Speak course. I know there's some nuggets up in there as well.
Man, let me tell you something. So when you mentioned speaking about something you're passionate about, that's an excellent tip, and it's also something that I mentioned in the course as well. I remember back when I was in high school, and we used to do in English class, we used to have these, kind of the I guess formal debates. Right. There'd be a pro side and a con side, and you're put on a side, and you had to argue that side.
Man. Yeah,
it was very difficult, at least for me, to argue a side that I didn't agree with, because you're not even in that mind frame. So to even come up with the points that you have to come up with to argue about something that you don't agree with, it's difficult. So when it comes to public speaking, it's imperative, I'd say, to talk about something you actually believe in.
Yeah, passion is huge. You can tell. The audience can tell. That energy is contagious. And the inverse is true too. If you can care less, if you're not careful, that will be transferred to the audience as well, and then they won't care as much either.
For sure. And another thing, I just thought about it. You say you were anxious sometimes before you speak. Yeah. I think that's is a sign of you actually caring about your message, because kind of look at what you just said. If you don't care, you're less anxious, you're less nervous, because you don't really care what the outcome is.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you'd like people to know about the things that you're doing?
Man, I'm just honored again to be here. I'm doing a number of projects. I try to put out stuff here and there. Very active on Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. So I'm always interested in connecting and finding opportunities to collaborate with other people who are doing creative things, inspiring things in the STEM field. So that's pretty much all I'll say. I'm out here. I'll continue to do what I'm doing. Hit me up. I would love to come to your school, love to come to your company, and to collaborate on some creative, inspiring project in the STEM world.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I would say you can Google STEMedia pretty much and find our website. Connect with me on LinkedIn and shoot a message on LinkedIn. Or I'll just give my email as well in here. My email is nehemiah@stemmedia.org. So that's Nehemiah, my first name, NEHEMIAH @STEMedia, one word with one M, STEMEDIA.org, Nehemiah@STEMedia.org. And I do my best to get back in touch with you. And I'm always excited about the new and exciting.
Excellent. Well, that marks the end of this episode of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering is a public speaking course, and it's called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that is teachthegeek.com. Thanks again for being on the channel, Nehemiah.
Neil, thanks for having me, man.
All right.